All right, hello and welcome to Certara's LinkedIn Live event. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alberto O'Brien, and I'm an Associate Director of Business Development and Marketing at Certara, a global leader in biosimulation. And I'd like to give a special thank you to Pharmacometrics Africa for co-hosting this event with us. So today we'll be discussing pharmacometrics and ClinPharm FOMO, fear of missing out, and why the future of research is in Africa. We'll be discussing this today with our panelists, which includes Dr. Colin Pillai, who is the founder of CP Plus and the CEO of Pharmacometrics Africa. We also have Dr. Craig Rayner, who is the president of Certara's Integrative Drug Development. We have Dr. Pumla Sinoxide, who is an associate professor in clinical pharmacology at the University of Cape Town, Western Cape, South Africa. And we are also joined by Dr. Katrina Waite, who is a reader in clinical pharmacology at the University of Liverpool. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you.
Good to be here.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our first question. And that question is, can you please tell us about your role?
Great. Look, I might take a first stab at that, Alberto. So I'm Craig Rayner. I'm the president of Integrated Drug Development at Certara, where I've got two main hats that I wear. The first is really as a drug developer and a clinical pharmacologist, where I'm an active consultant, I guess, on the dance floor, and that's supporting biotechs, not-for-profits, pharma, government, on accelerating medicine development through strategy and stewardship. And I have a particular specialisation in my career in infectious diseases, global health and paediatrics. And I guess the other hat I wear is supporting an incredible team of drug developers from pharma, academia, regulatory, industrial backgrounds here in Certara. And my role there is to nurture and grow our team and to support their innovative work, really to increase the adoption of model-informed drug development across the entire ecosystem. So great to be here.
Great, thank you for providing that background. Who would like to go next?
Pumla, why don't you go next?
Right. My name is Pumla Sinoxide. I am a medical doctor by training, and I'm specialized in clinical pharmacology. I'm now an associate professor at UCT, and I have a small group leading pharmacogenomics projects. So I'm a PI for a few projects, and I supervise postgraduate students doing that, in addition to teaching undergraduate students clinical pharmacology. Recently, I've been nominated to be one of the board of directors for Pharmacometrics Africa as the chief medical officer. Right, go on, Colin.
Okay, so you give it to me. Thanks, Pumla. So I'm a clinical pharmacologist and a mathematical modeler. As Alberto indicated at the beginning, I run two social ventures, CP Plus Associates, as well as Pharmacometrics Africa. Essentially, what these two groups do is to run training programs, and training programs centered around real projects. What helps me in this role is that I'm also an advisor to a large number of organizations. So this is big philanthropies like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, multinational corporations, and organizations like Craig's Certara, as well as on-the-ground groups like the H3D Foundation in Cape Town. Thanks, and Katrina, over to you.
Sure. So I'm Katrina Waite. I'm a clinical pharmacologist from the UK, meaning I'm a consultant physician, but I'm also trained in pharmacology. And for the last 6 years, I've been at the Infectious Diseases Institute at Makerere, where I'm doing a Wellcome Trust funded project. My main areas of interest are people that don't have dosing information or safety information for those groups. For example, pregnant women, breastfeeding women, young children, people who've got a lot of chronic comorbidities. We just don't have the data for these groups, but it's difficult to do studies as well. So I do a mixture of clinical trials, mathematical modeling, which includes both PBPK and population PK, also public engagement and involvement to try and really reach this population with the data that we need to be able to make those decisions for the patients that need it most.
Right, fantastic. Thank you all for providing your backgrounds. And again, thank you for joining us today. And let's jump into our next question. What is the current clinical drug development climate like in Africa?
So I'm going to get started with that one, and I'm going to hand over and sort of ping Pumla and Katrina. So generics predominates. From the clinical trial perspective, you by and large have late phase clinical trials. Early phase clinical pharmacology studies, there's a very small number. In fact, every time I look at clinicaltrials.gov, less than 2% of global clinical trials happens on the continent of Africa. Regulatory systems are variable across the continent, but that is changing. In fact, everything's changing. So when I said that early phase studies, there's very few of them, Pumla was involved with one of the first, and maybe Pumla, you want to take over from here and talk a little bit about, your involvement with first in human studies down in Cape Town.
I agree with Colin that the early development studies are far and few in between. And I tried to have a look in the PACTA clinical trial registry to just have a look at how many studies are actually early development studies, just even looking at phase 2 and phase 1 studies, and they are minimal. So most of the studies are still just looking at phase 3 and post-marketing studies. So clinical development is still lurking or lagging behind the high-income countries. And so I think although it varies from country to country, on the whole, it's still very minimal involvement with early development studies, which is a huge problem in my belief.
And I would follow up on that, because obviously it's really important that we study drugs in the populations where they're going to be used. And we cannot assume that data that are gained in for example, a European or a North American population are applicable to both the genetics, the environment, the diet, many other factors in sub-Saharan Africa. So at the Infectious Diseases Institute, we've started in the past few years to do some healthy volunteer studies. I'm aware of at least 2 that we've been involved in. And to do that, we've had to sort of raise awareness of what it is we're trying to do, to sensitize the different regulators, ethics committees, National Drug Authority, and also the communities, because you want to make it very clear that we're not experimenting on people, but rather we're trying to get that data that will inform the safest possible use of that drug in the population that need it.
Actually, just if I can just go back to doing the first phase 1 study that Colin referred to, when we were trying to recruit patients for the studies, they actually didn't understand why, if they're supposed to be involved in the clinical trial, because they're used to being enrolled as patients in the phase 3 clinical trials. Yeah.
All right, great responses. All right, let's roll into our next question. What is the biggest misconception when it comes to conducting clinical research in Africa?
Other than thinking that Africa is a country, but I actually think that the biggest misconception is that we actually aren't able to do these studies, and I think that's a huge challenge for people who are looking to do early development studies in Africa. So I think that's the biggest misconception, that we don't have clinical sites, we don't have clinical trialists that can actually do the work that's required.
Yeah, and I would also like to follow up. I think one thing that has been quite challenging is when it seems that investigators who are based overseas perhaps come in and do a trial and then disappear, and the samples are sent somewhere else for bioanalysis and the data are sent somewhere else for mathematical modeling. And that's why there's a huge shift, and certainly in my research program in Uganda, we're emphasizing capacity building both in the lab, so we can analyse the samples on site, but also in the mathematical modelling, so that the bioanalysis and the modelling are all part of the core study team. It's an African problem, it's addressed in Africa by African researchers, and it's much more transparent what we're doing, because I think in the past that hasn't always been done as well as it could have been. Now, obviously there are good reasons for that we didn't have that capacity, so what else could we do? But the tide is definitely turning, and perhaps Colin, you might want to say something about that.
Yeah, no, I was going to suggest that we all shout out our top item that we think is the misconception, but you guys stole mine. Maybe Craig has a different one. So for me, I would say a misconception that quality does not exist on the on the continent. Craig, do you have one?
Yeah, I do. I do have one, and I think it's maybe it's just saying the same thing as that you have is that there is incredible depth and brilliance on the continent, and to underestimate that is I think at everyone's detriment, and to think that the brilliance on the continent cannot be plugged in and contribute at a global level. Yeah, I think that's another misconception.
All right, great answers. I'd actually like to jump in with an audience question. And this question is there a role of modeling and simulation in generic drug development? Can BA/BE studies profit from modeling and simulation?
So let me start, and then Craig, maybe you can help also, from the perspective of what you see from Certara. So bioavailability, bioequivalent studies are what we call feed and bleed studies. They usually richly sampled studies. The types of analysis methods that we do there are what is known as non-compartmental analysis, where you read off certain things that you can see in a well-designed study. So is there a need to do modeling and simulation for that? Probably for the design of the studies, but for the analysis, if it's well conducted, well designed, probably not. It's good that you asked the question, because it also leads from the fact that I mentioned that by and large, there's generic drug development that happens on the continent. But maybe I just pause there for the moment, see what Craig has to add, and I might come back on something else. Craig?
Yeah, no, that's a really good lead-in, Colin. I think, as you said, the standard feed and bleed with the relative bioavailability studies and bioequivalent studies are generally pretty highly regulated and pretty standardized with the methodologies using non-compartmental analysis. I think where there's opportunity, though, is to think about more innovative methods with being able to answer questions about the equivalence between certain products. So part of that could be through the use of physiological-based PK models in particularly challenging or complex drugs that one might administer. So, for example, trying to get a bioequivalent study between a dermally administered a drug product is very different to a traditional feed and bleed. So you end up having to use more sophisticated approaches to be able to argue that perhaps a dermal equivalence might be achieved, and that may actually even be done without a clinical trial. So I guess what I would say is that when you start to move into some of these more sophisticated approaches where you've got to use the data in different ways, and that may be from population pharmacometric methodologies that are in patient populations and trying to understand the impact of the specific patients, which Katrina and I think Pumla have also touched on. I think this is where the questions around the comparability of a particular product in a generic sense can really be augmented by these pharmacometrics methodologies. And I think that this is an important part about just extending it from the feed and bleed in the generics industry to more making sure that whatever has been determined to be fit for purpose on the continent is taking into account these other factors where the patients are different in terms of demography, shape, size, pharmacogenetics, and so on.
Yeah, I think Craig's kind of nailed it on that one. So, just the last point on it, that sometimes, when there's large numbers of these BA/BE studies done, so it might make sense to pool the data from there, and you might get insights into the population, bearing in mind that most of the BA/BE studies are done in healthy volunteer patient populations. Thanks, Alberto. Back to you.
Great answers. We're loving these audience questions. Another question that came in is, what are the most impactful research and development success stories that have come out of Africa in the last 5 years?
Perhaps I can answer this one. I want to highlight, because I was part of the program that actually participated in the first phase 1 first in men study for a novel anti-malarial drug, and that was a first in men study for a drug that was developed at UCT in collaboration with partners from MMV and the Department of Science and Technology. I was the lead investigator for that clinical trial, and in my view, it was a small step for me, perhaps, but a giant leap, highlighting that we have the capability of doing these exploratory drug development studies in Africa. Maybe, Katrina, you have something to add?
Yes, so I've already mentioned the importance of studying drugs in pregnancy and breastfeeding. And whilst people are very concerned about doing these studies, there are times when actually the pregnant woman stands to benefit even more than a non-pregnant individual. And one example of this was the dolutegravir in pregnant HIV mothers and their neonates, otherwise known as the Dolphin Studies. You see, dolutegravir, some of you will have heard of. It's now recommended by the WHO as first-line antiretroviral therapy. But when it first came out, obviously it hadn't been tested in pregnancy, but it worked about twice as quickly as the conventional first-line agents. So what that meant is if a mother came to us in late pregnancy, the existing standard of care just didn't have time to suppress the viral load to undetectable by delivery. And that's the most important thing to do in order to reduce the risk of infection to the baby. So we felt that actually, ethically, it's essential that we study this early on in pregnant mothers. So we did that, and we showed firstly that it was more effective than the standard of care in this population. It was safe, it was well tolerated. We went on to do a much larger trial. So we've looked at drug concentrations in breast milk, across the placenta, in the babies. There's also long-term infant development studies and quite a lot of qualitative and community engagement work surrounding that program. So I think that was the first trial I know of for antiretrovirals that specifically recruited third trimester women only. And we did that in Africa because that was where we were seeing the challenge. And that's had substantial impact.
So I get a chance to give one as well, right, Alberto?
Yeah, you do. So we have a special question for you, Colin.
Oh, okay. No, I thought you still was on the topic of the exciting things that came out of the continent. But
no, my apologies. We can definitely have you answer, Colin. Go right on ahead.
So for me, I've worked in the area of tuberculosis, and seeing bedaquiline come out of the big studies. And bedaquiline, for those of you that don't know, was the first big new drug for tuberculosis. The last one was the rifampins way back in the 50s. And bedaquilin's, the first author paper comes from, Andreas Deacon down in Cape Town. And for that to come out of South Africa, for the development to happen there, amazing. Thank you, Alberto. Back to you. I had to throw that one in.
Right, it's actually coming right back to you, Colin. So we have a special question for you. Colin, you did such a great job with the NGS program. Are you thinking of replicating that success story with Pharmacometrics?
So that has to be one of the NGS fellows in the audience. So again, just for the broader audience, this is a program that was run out of Basel. NGS is not next generation sequencing, but was a deliberate play on the words. We call it the Next Generation Scientist Program. It was a joint program between Novartis and the University of Basel. And essentially, it involved an immersive learning experience within a big multinational pharma company, namely Novartis. We ran the program. We took in about 20 individuals every year. It currently still runs, and we summarized the program about 7 years after starting it. And we were just blown away by the outputs and the impact of such a program. Now, it's a really good idea about doing something similar. Maybe we hold that towards the end, and let's see if I can prod Craig in terms of finding some ways in which we could get people to participate in something like that. Thanks, Alberto.
That's great. All right, our next question is, how can we incentivize investing in quantitative pharmacology training in low to middle income countries?
Well, I'm happy to take a first stab at that from I guess an outside-in perspective, and I would really appreciate Pumla and Katrina's insights as well. It's building competencies in any ecosystem anywhere requires a business case. Believe it or not, you have to establish a firm business case, and that business case will differ really depending upon who the stakeholder will be. So you need to be able to continue to build that competency. You need to be thinking, all right, what is actually in it for me from their perspectives? For example, a large pharma company will have different needs for a return on investment for trying to incentivize growth, because they will have a different perspective. A small biotech will be different to an academic institution, to a large philanthropic, not-for-profit or government. But I guess, if I think about Certara, if you look at a strategic advisory company and a technology company like Certara, we look at the opportunity via a different lens too. So I think what I would say, the best way to get investment, but not just piecemeal investment, a durable investment, an investment which is actually going to provide something in perpetuity, so that we can be doing well and good at the same time, is that you've got to have multiple alignment of multiple stakeholders' interests. So what that means is trying to get the key people who are in on the continent, like Pumla and Katrina and other stakeholders who can see that there's great opportunity there, and you've got to get us all on the same side of the table and put the problem on the other side of the table, and have all of the agendas put up and see how you can be getting a win-win-win-win-win across it. Now, if that happens, you have a durable, sustainable way to be able to develop talent, invest in talent, grow talent. So I'll just make that comment. It's about the business case and walking in everyone's shoes.
So Alberto, I do have some thoughts on it, but I'm keen to hear from Pumla or Katrina first on that one. And if you guys don't want to comment, then I'll just jump in afterwards.
I have just a short answer to that. I think training people who are capable of doing pharmacometric studies in Africa, who are going to respond to local problems using the best technology there is, or the best skills there is a win-win for anyone who's thinking of investing in increasing capability in Africa.
And I guess I would comment that there's a bit of a need to demystify clinical pharmacology. Those of us that are working in the field, and that must be many of the audience, we know what we're talking about when we start throwing out all these terms, pharmacovigilance, pharmacokinetic, pharmacometric, pharmacodynamic, so on. But actually, many of our potential collaborating partners and some of the stakeholders don't really see exactly what we do because we're so broad and so diverse. So one thing we're trying to do a bit more of in Uganda is to try and raise awareness of who we are, what we do, why it matters. And through the British Pharmacological Association, they have an ambassadors scheme. And we're working again to raise the profile of pharmacology and invite that kind of discussion and exchange of ideas. So it's not so much on a regulator and stakeholder, high-level stakeholder, but more down at the level of students and potential future colleagues. So for example, Pharmacometrics Africa, we're about to launch the Uganda chapter of Pharmacometrics Africa, which is really, really exciting. But we're very aware that alongside that, as well as the specific training, we need to reach out into the university. We need to reach out to students in mathematics, engineering, statistics, other disciplines who are going to come with that talent and those ideas, because people don't know what the unknown unknowns are. And it's up to us, I think, and many of you on the call, to really show people.
So this is already great stuff, and now I need to think up new ones because Pumla and Katrina already gave it. But so for me, I would say, one point is incentivize by creating jobs. Sure. And I think that's one key one. I loved everything that you said, Craig, in terms of showing the business case. So maybe the other plug that I would do, capacity development is hard to get funded. So, and it's hard to show outcomes. It's easy to show outputs. We trained 100 people, we trained 200 people, but how did that convert into individuals that are actually doing the job? So even though it's hard to show outcomes, collect the data, analyze the data, adjust your programs as needed, and publicize it. And publicize the good and the bad, because then people can learn from what should be done more of and what should be less of. Thanks, Alberto.
All right, great responses. So this next audience question kind of piggybacks on this. So where do you think the investment for developing African pharmacometric talent should come from? The companies, the universities, or drug regulatory organizations?
So it's easy for me to say it's a team sport, right? Let's not say it's everybody else except me. So I think we can all play our part, and we'll probably, I'll invite Pumla and Katrina to close out on giving some clear answers as to what individuals can put forward. So certainly the regulatory agencies within the continent tend to be rather under-resourced. For us to expect that the regulatory agencies is going to be able to provide resource to do this, I'd say that's probably not going to happen in the short term. And there's multiple reasons why they're under-resourced anyway. In terms of the big multinational organizations, the pharma companies, I'd say they would certainly be an important player. And then we can just go back to the point that we made about show the business case. Many of these big companies would want to initially start some of these programs as corporate responsibility activities, but corporate responsibility is in fact core business. And maybe I'll pause there for a moment and see if my colleagues want to add something else, Alberto.
I think what I can also add as potential people who might want to invest in training capabilities are research foundations. As Katrina said, we need to demystify what pharmacology is, and if they understand what the benefits of pharmacometrics are, and as compared to doing the traditional clinical trials, then they would actually see a point in investing in training pharmacometricians in Africa.
I'd like to add maybe another angle here as well, and I kind of think about like microeconomy, or microfinancing, I should say. If you can have whatever you establish as a going concern, well, then it will continue to grow. So I think that the building blocks of any kind of investment cannot be, it needs to be turning some return on investment, which is going to be able to be reinvested and create that virtuous cycle. In the same way microfinancing works. So I think that we need to be thinking very seriously about how you create the attraction there, that, you know, from little things, big things grow. And I think that if you can get the bones of it right, where it is building and developing, and it's a virtuous cycle, and you're having them continue to be able to attract business to also support there. Again, it gets back into that business case. I know no one likes to talk about business cases, but for me that is the way where you can continue to do good and do well. And I think if you can get the foundations right, then everything from that can kind of blossom. And I think that pharmacometrics is a very is a beautiful kernel for starting this, because really you need internet connectivity, you need beautifully big minds and people who can be globally connected like everybody is in the COVID situation. So, you know, geography is now kind of a bit more agnostic. It's very competency driven what we do. So if you can grow that competency and make it a going concern, I think that creates like that microfinancing, that attraction to continue to build around it. Add more clinical pharmacologists, add toxicologists, add an industry. I'll stop there.
So, Craig, can I be slightly devil's advocate then?
Please.
Because
yeah.
I'm aware when we have these panels, we're all very much on the same wavelength that this is really, really important. We need that capacity on the ground. We need African solutions to African problems. But the difficulty, I suppose, is what do I tell somebody that's looking at a career in this area? And the question for me will be, is it sustainable? Do I have a secure job prospect, or am I better doing something that's less dependent on, you know, grants that can be a little bit hit and miss and so forth? So how do we move beyond agreeing that this is very much an area that we should be working on with our stakeholders, with our communities, with our students? We should be raising the profile. We should be putting all the energy we have. But when it comes to it, are there going to be jobs?
Look, I'm 100% in alignment with you. And I think this is where the elements of the industry partnerships across the ecosystem. So it gets back to that point that I made earlier. You've got to have people seeing that win-win-win. So ultimately, you're solving that problem about jobs creation. I don't know if it was Colin or Pumlori who'd said about the jobs creation. So what I would be saying is that it is, you know, for this to be durable and sustainable, we have to be able to have a commitment that we're going to be continuing to grow jobs in that area. And I solemnly believe that there is a path to do that. Certainly from the Certara perspective there is. And so what I would be just asking for everyone out there is that those who are interested in wanting to crack that nut and get it right, you know, I'm sure linking to many of the people on this call, that you'll have a lot of people who are passionately keen to try to come up with that solution as well. Maybe I'll throw to Colin now to see if, and Paul up.
I'll defer to Colin.
So not a lot to add, Katrina. You know, what I also still see is that, you know, you highlighted the fact that oftentimes we collect the data, we have the data, the studies are done here, but then the stuff is sent outside of the country to be analyzed. So I do want to see the situation where the data is analyzed locally. Now, I also acknowledge that very often when the data is sent out, it might also be that it's sent out from Uganda down to Cape Town to be analyzed, or from Cape Town, you know, somewhere else, even though there might be a center just around the corner. So there might be very personal, individual reasons why people will send their data out. But the job creation and the analysis has to happen from starting from what are we doing now? What data are we collecting and where are we analyzing?
Thank you.
Alberto?
All right, that was a great discussion. So we have a really interesting audience question. Large parts of Africa, particularly rural Africa, depend a lot on herbal medicine. Any thoughts on the potentials of applying these advances in clinical pharmacology and pharmacometrics in herbal medicines?
So let me,
sorry, Colin, go.
You go, Katrina, you go first.
Okay, well, I'll give the example of the Dolphin study to start with. This study was done between Kampala and Cape Town. We've actually got a very strong partnership. But dolutegravir is known to bind to divalent cations. So there's very strict instructions about diet and when you take it, if you're having any iron supplements and so forth. But a lot of Ugandan women take herbal products called mumbwa, which is a range of different kind of basically clay-like products. And we don't know exactly what's in them. And that is exactly the kind of work that we're trying to build at IDI. Firstly, to do some bioanalysis and work out what's in these substances and is it something that's going to interact. We're doing some animal studies. We are doing those in the UK, partly because of infrastructure. But again, it directly speaks to the community. The thing that's fascinating about herbals, and I think Pumla, you'll agree, many of the patients certainly won't tell an outsider like me, but even the difference between the study team who are very urban, university educated and so forth, when they go up country, again, it's very difficult to find out exactly what people are taking. And that's where we're really needing to empower the communities, the village health teams, the community advocates, the community leaders to really get that information. And absolutely, that's work that can only be done in Africa. And as Pumla said earlier on, Africa is not a country. So again, the differences between Kampala and Cape Town are vast. But even in Uganda, we have like 40 linguistic groups, many tribes. There's vast differences even within a country. So it has to be done locally. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, what I wanted to add on to that one is, so I think that if I heard you correctly, Alberto, the question was about using advanced technologies like modeling and simulation, right? So for sure you can think about that, but this group of this panel is biased towards conventional research and development and conventional assessment of that. We have to start by acknowledging that many current drugs had its origins in herbal medicines. So I can list off a whole lot. I won't start because I won't stop. So I think more importantly, however, is that we need to go towards trying to find some sort of link between the practitioners of traditional medicine and the conventional medicine. And nowhere have we heard that stronger than now in the current pandemic. And by the way, it's good. We're 40 minutes into the meeting and we haven't mentioned the pandemic. So apologies that I mentioned it. But now with the pandemic going on, the WHO, Africa CDC have all emphasize the value of looking into these therapies because we currently still don't have a directly acting antiviral agent for SARS-CoV-2. So what we do need to do is to take lists of available drugs and then work them backwards through the system and try and identify what in it is working to find that somehow alignment with conventional R&D. Thanks, Alberto.
All right, thank you both. We have a special question for Pumla. Pumla, given your experience with ClinPharm studies, is there space to build phase 1 units along with BioA labs in the continent? And also, can we get an estimate of how many of these sites are present currently?
Right. I believe that we do have the capability of having phase 1 clinical trial units, and I can't give an exact estimate of how many units there are, but I do know that the African Academy of Sciences has put in some work in trying to locate where the clinical trialists are and where these centers are, so that people who are looking to do studies in Africa can easily find them. Perhaps Colin has a better idea about this database that AISA has come up with.
So the database that Pumla is talking about, we'll pop it up onto a screen. It's ctc.africa. It's a database of African clinical trial sites and capabilities. So it's not a registry of clinical trials. So it's sites and capabilities. A few years ago, in a program that I worked on, again with a company that I worked for previously, so a group of us went around and ran capacity development training programs to build up phase 1 clinical trial sites. So they certainly exist. There's a fairly large number of them. Like Pumla, I can't give you a precise number, but spanning the continent, there are several available there. The ctc.africa website or database should be able to give us an answer. Thanks, Alberto.
All right, thank you both. Looks like we have enough time for about 2 more questions. So the next question is, how do we solve negative impact that challenges the lack of database or bioinformatics of most African countries on potential benefit of pharmacometrics?
So I would start, and then again, maybe Craig, you can help a little bit with this. So if I understand if I reinterpret the question, so the question is about showing the value of pharmacometrics or showing the value of model-based approaches, and I would say that this is not a unique problem to Africa. This is a global problem. We've made significant advances in terms of highlighting the value that model-based approaches can help with the clinical drug development process, the preclinical drug development process, and also in the post-marketing phase. And then more and more we are seeing, especially with the stringent health authorities, the value of model-based approaches appearing in dossiers. And the biggest one that we just heard recently was about the Alzheimer's drug. But Craig, maybe you want to add to that.
The question starting from the limitations and challenges, I'd like to flip that around and actually and actually say the opportunities that probably come from developing medicines, on the continent, and particularly in areas of high market failures. And what I mean by that is that the challenges with actually getting data, the challenges with getting access to patients, the challenges with the environment that that are provided for the conduct of clinical trials, the challenges with the types of diseases that we're dealing with, emerging infectious diseases or diseases like onchocerciasis, where there's both an individual health benefit but a public health benefit. These are all challenges, but I think what they actually do is provide, and then you have the market failure element, lack of investment. So what that actually, it sounds like if you look at it in a half glass empty kind of view, those challenges seem to be immense. But what they actually are opportunities. Those market failures, not enough money, et cetera, challenging diseases, force us to be able to apply really advanced model-informed drug development methods. They force us to use clinical pharmacology, adaptive clinical trial design, the use of physiological-based PK models to capture, we spoke about herbal medicines and other elements, or ethnopharmacology differences. They force us to innovate. So I guess what I see as a challenge coming from this, and I hope I haven't strayed too far off the basis of the question here, is that I don't see it in a limitations way. I actually see that the environment which we have in Africa provides us opportunities to do things smarter, better, more of a sandbox of innovation, which has the ability to not only deliver on new therapeutics for important unmet diseases on the continent, but also MIDD regulatory science innovations, which can perhaps cross-pollinate into the more mainstream globally. So I think it's really important that we shift our mindset from actually it's hard to more like, wow, what opportunities are presented through these challenges.
And may I come in also? I wasn't sure if I heard in that question something to do with confidence in both computational power and also in data and data security and so forth. And there are increasing initiatives such as the Africa Centre of Excellence for Bioinformatics housed at IDI that have really, really strong computational power. And as Craig mentioned earlier on, computational power is quite an easy thing to bring in. Also, in terms of data, Colin mentioned earlier, one of the myths related to the quality of the work we do in Africa. And as with everywhere, there's a move to making data fair. So, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable to other users. So as we have that additional level of really robust, accredited data management plans and data sharing, again, some of those concerns, I think, will dissipate.
All right, well, thanks everyone. We're just about at time. We have time for one more question, and that question. All right. And our last question is, what is the future of drug discovery on the continent, and what excites you about the future?
I want to go first. So I mentioned in the start, and I kept pinging Pumla to see if she'd talk about the MMV048 study. So I work closely with the H3D Center and the H3D Foundation based out of the University of Cape Town with Kelly Chubale and his team. So their big claim to fame was that they discovered a molecule for malaria. And I think already with that started to prove a point, but then, all of us who have been involved with drug development know that molecules die and, you get hundreds of hits. So what was amazing with this one was that, through the efforts of Pumla and the team, they were able to take it all the way through to proof of concept studies. So they completed the first in human studies. For me, that's a wonderful story about the future of drug development on the continent, drug discovery and development.
Thank you, Colin.
I'd love to add in here, because then I think it's really important for Katrina and Pumla to provide a perspective. So let me provide one, and it's one very much of hope. So I think that I'll reinforce a couple of things that I think have been said, and I've said as well. As the global pandemic has really demonstrated that bright people from anywhere can contribute meaningfully to medicine development programs. I think the world has learned that it's competency and talent first, and second is geography. And it is very much the case for knowledge workers. Strategists, stewards, pharmacometricians who need a good internet connection and access to Zoom, a fast computer, but more importantly, the tenacity and the passion to make it work. So I have a really bullish view that in 10 years' time, I see the pharmacometrics competency on the continent to have a critical mass of global best practice talent. A vibrant regional ecosystem that's contributing globally, just as North America or Europe does in drug development, but also having the attention, also pivoting locally. And I see PMX Pharmacometrics being the kernel of significant integrated drug development competencies developing around that. And I think that kind of aligns with the H3D group, the capacity, in various countries that are there, and I see it can be a real kernel of growing an industry. So yeah, very, very bullish. So Pumla and Katrina, over to you.
I would like to take your comment about geography one step further. It's not just critical mass on the continent, it's that actually South-North partnerships, Africa can show the rest of the world what we can do. And I will give you a concrete example. So for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working on lactation pharmacology. So how much drug comes through the breast milk into the baby. And that's because women here often have no choice but to breastfeed. But of course, in high-income countries, women also want to breastfeed whilst they're taking different medication. And so often they're told you can't or you shouldn't because there are no data. So you have a choice either not to breastfeed or not take the drug or take an older drug or take a risk. And that is not acceptable. Now, we've developed considerable expertise in lactation pharmacology in Uganda. And in my current Wellcome Fellowship, I actually have funding for a South-North partnership where I bring my specialists to the UK to do some training and actually support the setting up of a trial site in Liverpool. And I think we're going to see more of that. We're going to see more of the innovation and creativity coming from Africa out to the rest of the world. And that excites me tremendously. And I think, Pumla, you have the last word on this exciting topic.
Right. For me, I like when in my introduction, I did say that I do mostly pharmacogenomic studies. And I think what excites me is that people should recognize that Africans are different and there are differences between Africans, and to actually study drugs in Africans is very important because we do actually metabolize our drugs differently. And we are starting with doing pharmacogenetic studies that are coming up with novel associations, and it's important to actually put some effort in increasing capabilities in this area.
Well, fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Before concluding this event, we do have a few announcements. And we'll have Katrina and Pumla talk a bit about PMX Africa.
Pumla, would you like to go first?
So the vision of PMX Africa is actually to increase the clinical pharmacology scientists who will actually be working in Africa, working on locally generated data and attracting international researchers to collaborate with African scientists. So we're trying to increase this capability, and I think it's very important. If you want to get involved, you actually need to follow us on PMS Africa to get more about the Pharmacometrics Africa. And you should also actually attend our WCOP 22, which is the World Congress of Pharmacometrics, which goes live tomorrow. So if you're going to be, it's important that you join us in the conference. Colin, I think you should have a last word on this.
On the conference, and then I'm going to give it to you, Katrina, to continue. So the World Conference on Pharmacometrics, we were amazed that we were able to bring this conference to the continent of Africa. So it's the 29th of March to the 1st of April, with quite a few pre-conference training events that will happen before that. So abstracts, etc., go live tomorrow. Katrina, back to you.
I would just say, I think now is the time. These past couple of years have shown us more than ever before that now is the time to really harness those skills in Africa. We've used the term critical mass, and I think it's there. And the pandemic has shown us that geography shouldn't be a limitation. I think when you hear us talk, you can see that we could continue to talk until midnight. But each one of us, yes, there's the PMX Africa Twitter, but I think each one of us would be quite happy for you to follow us, to reach out to us with any questions, any discussion. This is our life, this is our passion. So please get involved. There's no question that's a silly question. Reach out to us and you can be part of that amazing future. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks again, everyone. So the next announcement is please save the date for our September 18th fundraiser to benefit Africa Partners Medical and Pharmacometrics Africa. This family-friendly event will take place in Raleigh, North Carolina, and will feature music and a West African dinner. And on behalf of Certara and Pharmacometrics Africa, we thank you for participating in this LinkedIn Live event, and we'll continue to examine important issues and upcoming events. In the meantime, I'm Alberto Bryan, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.